Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Haefner. Welcome to Sports Psych in a Minute, your weekly resource for tips and insights into the psychological side of equestrian sport. I read this great article this week by Jess Clausen in the Plaid Horse about toxic trainer relationships. She gives a lot of thought and great suggestions about how to evaluate trainers and relationships with trainers so we can find the best trainer for ourselves or for our children. I strongly recommend reading it. What I'd like to talk with you about today is one thing that came out of my reading that article, and that is the dynamic balance between protection and safety and security, keeping ourselves safe in the world, and this idea of risk. We unfortunately live in a world where people tend to take sides. It's pretty common to hear people talk about or complain that we are overprotective of our kids these days, that we bubble wrap them, that we have phrases like helicopter parents and things to describe that situation. On the other side, we have people that argue that we know a lot more about the dangers in our ever increasingly complex world, and if we know about those dangers, shouldn't we protect our children from those dangers? An example of that in riding would be something like concussions. We know a lot more about concussions or repeated concussions and their impact over time. So that now, rather than the paper-thin hunt caps that I wore as a child, we now have helmets which are designed to protect the head and the brain from concussive force if there is a fall or if someone has an accident. So who's right? Where do we fall in terms of these two things? My feeling is that we're always going to balance those two things. And what I'd like to do is to share a thought or two about how you know when something that you struggle with or a challenge is something that's going to be harmful to you or your child overall. And then on the other side of things, if we accept that we need to push ourselves and that ultimately learning requires a certain degree of discomfort, where does that discomfort cross over into something that's not productive? So let's deal with the protective end first. I think if we're really intent on learning, we need to accept the fact that we are going to necessarily experience some feelings like frustration or maybe some anxiety or discomfort, the idea of getting out of our comfort zone in order to learn. Where I draw the line in terms of protectionism, particularly when it comes to relationships between riders and trainers, is this idea that our interactions with trainers with students, students with trainers, in both directions, should have a basic level of dignity and respect. We should be treated with a basic level of dignity and respect, and we should treat others with a basic level of dignity and respect. So, when you get to a place, and if there are behaviors like screaming, a trainer screaming at a student, making fun of a student, shaming a student, playing mind games, those things, along with obviously other types of emotional or physical or sexual abuse, those things are clearly on the side of being injurious to ourselves or our students and are things that require us to make a change to protect ourselves in those situations. Let's go to the other side and risk. How do we know when we are pushing ourselves enough? Well, one of the things that I would say is that if being uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form is part of the learning process, one of the ways that you can assess whether the learning process, that whether you are being pushed too far or someone is pushing maybe your child too far, is to look at the process over time and look at it in a couple of different ways. So one piece and a fundamental level is, over time, are you actually learning and progressing? One of the things that we know about being pushed way outside of our comfort zone, where we feel intensely uncomfortable or anxious or perhaps fearful, is that we shut down. In that sense, our ability to learn is offline when we get pushed too far out into that discomfort, intense discomfort. So ask that question over time: am I actually learning? Is my discomfort in the service of learning? The other thing is the impact of that discomfort. Is it having some sort of an overflow impact on other areas of our lives? So with kids, this is easiest to see. Do they come home? Are they pleasant? Are they irritable? Are they grumpy? A lot of times when kids feel stressed in one situation, they come home, take it out in another situation. And often they take it out on their families. So, is there an impact, a negative impact on other areas of our lives? For us, do we lose sleep over it? Is it eating away at our motivation? Do we find ourselves less excited about going in to take our lesson? Those are all signs that we may be pushing ourselves, or in this case, with trainers, being pushed too far. A final word is for trainers and instructors. We all hope that as trainers and instructors we know enough about our craft, about riding, about the things that we're teaching people. But one of the things that we may not know as much about is how to read people in these situations. So what I would say to instructors and trainers is one of your best assets in terms of helping students move forward is to grow in your understanding of individuals and people and how best to appreciate the differences and provide the optimal level of push to help people progress, move forward, and learn. This has been Sports Psych in a Minute. We'll see you next week.
This is Heike from Horse World Connect. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and tune in to the next one. You might discover an equine business you haven't heard of yet, or receive advice from experts in their field. Our podcasts are short, informative, and entertaining. Want to learn more about the person you just listened to? Visit horseworldconnect.com and check out the listing page. And by the way, we'd love for you to join our herd and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.